We stay with issues having to do with the eradication of situations like Atipoka Ayo, because there are two Ghanas. For 1 out of every 4 people, access to basic human needs like food, shelter, and safe drinking water is a struggle. This quarter of Ghana's population have living conditions and outlook so different from the other three quarters, I should say, that according to UNICEF, it is as if they are living in 2 different countries. In spite of numerous social interventions over the years, the gap between the rich and the poor is at the highest level, with the nation's top 10% consuming 1/3 of everything and the poorest taking 1.7%. Today, October 17, is International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, and we are talking about how to bridge the gap between the two Ghanas. Minister for Gender, Children and Social Protection, Otiko Djaba, has been telling my colleague Gifty Andwapia some of the interventions government is implementing in the eradication of poverty.
So some have actually said that poverty is a disease. And so many times people have argued why there are so many resources here in Ghana, in Africa, but yet we're wallowing in poverty. People cannot have 3 square meals. It's sad. That is why today the UN has set the day aside as an international day for the eradication of poverty. You could argue out whether or not we'll be able to eradicate poverty at all, but we can do something about it, certainly, which is why, in collaboration with UNICEF, Joy News is spending some time with the Minister for Gender, Children and Social Protection, Otiko Djaba, to have a conversation about where are we, where do we go from here, how do we deal with the canker of poverty. You're welcome, ma'am.
Thank you.
Let me start by asking you whether we know of any available statistics, because it is said that if you know the problem, then you can deal with it and deal with it decisively. What do we know about the available statistics on the poverty gap in Ghana at the moment?
Thank you very much. And before I answer that, I would like to wish all the people in Ghana that in terms of the fact that poverty is not a happy place to be. So I cannot say happy poverty day, no, but it is a day of hope, because we are marking the moving away from poverty, eradicating it. That's the #1 sustainable development goal, and also zero hunger. Ghana has signed on since 2015 to the Sustainable Development Goals, and that by 2030 we should achieve the 17 goals. And then for the AU, we've also moved it to 2063.
Speaking about the development goals, by the way, just so you don't find it so boring, here is a very beautiful football that puts it right here at #1. And #2 is somewhere around this ball, that's removing hunger or eradicating hunger. And when you put those two together, you know that they're a pair. Okay, so we can move on from there.
So the Ghana Poverty and Inequality Report, it confirms that between 1992 and 2030, Ghana's national level of poverty, it fell by half, from 56.5% to 24.2%. Therefore, the Millennium Development Goal 1, the target, was achieved. Even though, as we speak, by the World Bank report of 2013, 10.7% of world's population live on less than $1.9 a day, compared to 12.4% in 2012. It's dynamic in terms of poverty. You can be poor today, rich tomorrow. You can be rich today and poor tomorrow. And the different issues that make it more difficult for it to be sustained is the lack of education, especially in Africa. And so with the Free SHS initiative, that is the breakthrough for the people of Africa. And our president at the UN made this comment about the Free SHS initiative, and as he's the AU gender champion and the co-chair of the Sustainable Development Goals, he's going to market this idea of Free SHS as the breakthrough for Africa to take us out of poverty. So for me, the ministry is the leading agency to handle social protection and persons of vulnerable persons.
Right.
And we have put in place various policies like the social protection policy. We are working on the affirmative action bill. I'll talk about it later.
And I want us to actually list the social interventions that you have on board and exactly practically, because we hear a lot of English and some people are really tired of hearing English. They're really tired of hearing about policies. People want to hear the things that they can relate to directly and ask themselves how they can remove that little boy on the streets, how they can remove that kaya. So I'd like for you to list those things for me. But speaking of the the MDGs and the fact that we're able to achieve the MDG goal, one of halving poverty, it also says that away from what in that year, if you took 2 Ghanaians, one of them was bound to be poor. At this time, we're looking at 4, so that looks like a good thing. But we still know that there's still a huge gap between the haves and the have-nots. So the person who is rich is extremely rich per our standards, by the way, and the person who is poor is extremely poor. Then let's come to the interventions. What are we doing?
Poverty is not for any Ghanaian, and we need every Ghanaian to believe in himself or herself, believe that Ghana is the best place on earth. We have challenges, but we are working on them. That is what our president means by believe in Ghana, breathe Ghana, eat Ghana, wear Ghana. Be proud to be a Ghanaian. And poverty is not constant. Perhaps through education, definitely through education and the free HSS, we'll leap out of
sounds like
poverty.
A long-term solution.
It's not a long-term, because immediately, if you are on the street and you got into SHS, you are off the street. If you are a child of school-going age, per Children's Act, and I would like to say this before I continue, that having the policy is the beginning. You need a national policy.
Something that guides
all of us and affects all of us. So they have a very critical role to play, and Ghana has a lot of policies. But the implementation and the enforcement is what we are now privileged to have the opportunity to embark on. And the Operation Get Off the Street initiative that we are starting.
Which operation is that?
It is an operation that we are going to be launching in November. We are starting with mapping all the various people on the streets, like hawkers, like the kayaye, like the beggars, like the destitute, people who are mental, anybody on the street, because the street is nowhere to live or to sell.
So you want to clear these people off the street?
We want to clear people off the streets. It cannot happen overnight.
Right. If I can recall, I think your predecessor, Nana Yelith, had started something like that. I don't know. Was it sustainable?
From street to school. It was a pilot. No, it was a pilot.
It didn't work?
It worked. It was very successful.
So those people that they took off the streets are in school now?
Yes. It's based on that pilot that we are now expanding it nationwide. That anybody who is on the street should get off. If you are of school-going age, we need to get you into school. And you know, when people get used to making money, you can't just move them away. So we are organizing sensitization programs when we finish with the mapping. And then we get some shelters where we can do counseling, how we can reintegrate them with their families. Some of them run away from home. Then the hawkers who are above 18, some are selling plantain chips. We can give them the training and startups with the LEAP, the new LEAP, so that they also will have a business. With the One District, One Factory, they can also get involved in some of these activities.
And you say this is not long-term?
No, it's not long-term.
How short-term is it?
Because we trained my predecessor, 400 Kayaye. Some of them, we've been able to get the fast food joints to engage them. We did a diaspora program where they make beads, jewelry. They make basketry. I'll show you, there's a basket here. And they are selling them. So it's giving them some money. They know exactly what they want. Persons who are vulnerable, persons who are disabled, they are all part of this program. So the LEAP is to actually leap people out of poverty. An accident can make you poor because you might lose your parents or a limb or both limbs, and it will be difficult for you to be productive. But we have programs that will sensitize people, give them the skills training, and the startup. The Youth Employment Authority are also there. Recently, the Ministry of Roads engaged 70,000 persons with disability as operators of the toll booths. So there are all sorts of interventions that the government is bringing on board, the planting for food, the free fertilizer. These are all social interventions, capitation grant, national health insurance, alawa has been paid, you know. So things, it's not long term. We have a short term program, medium term, and a long term. We have a sustainable program in place to eradicate poverty. And we are very strategic about it.
Do you want to give me any examples of your very short-term interventions?
Very short-term intervention is one that I've mentioned about
the off the streets program, operation off the streets.
Exactly. Also, we are having a girls leadership initiative. It's a mentoring program that we are identifying young girls so that we form girls leadership clubs, identify them from day nursery about how to be a leader as you grow up. And then we are also re-looking at the affirmative action bill, because when governments change, you have to review it. They elapse. The bills that did not go to Parliament, they elapse. And so that will also be going to the Attorney General's office, and then to Cabinet, and then to Parliament. That will happen this year. School feeding is going on, and so it is reducing poverty. And you know, with the free SHS, more children are in school who will be eating in school. So hunger will also be reducing. We are insisting, and that is a policy from Cabinet, that we use made in Ghana food, homegrown food, working with the buffer stock, identifying our farmers so that we can buy from them. And then the women too will be cooking. We've made sure that we have more women as caterers. And then the children too will go to school. When they eat, they'll be more, they'll be stronger in terms of health. Their cognitive skills will open up, and then they'll be in school and stay in school. So those are short-term measures.